Well, Australia's falling, if it hasn't already fallen right into, an energy crisis. And it's been born of an idiotic insistence that wind and solar can somehow provide baseload energy for the nation. Now, successive governments have thrown hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies at these white elephants, and the result has been nothing short of a disaster. Australia now has some of the highest cost energy on the planet. Our grid system is unstable, and the financial cost has seen our greatest economic advantage, that has been cheap and abundant power, literally disappear. And it helps explain why so many of our manufacturing industries have disappeared too. This has all been done to save the planet from the non-pollutant, yes, that's right, the non-pollutant and the essential gas carbon dioxide, which the unscientific and the plain stupid claim is destroying the planet. Now, bizarrely, the chief advocates for the horrors of climate change, who demand emissions-free energy, refuse to countenance the only carbon dioxide-free baseload power available in the world, nuclear energy. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Gideon Rozner from the IPA. Gideon, thanks so much for your time tonight. Number one of my talking points. In the United States of America, the average nuclear energy plant generates an annual $40 million in salaries and wages for its workers. It employs between 400 and 700 people, and it goes on to purchase about $470 million per year in local goods and services from the community. The total industry there adds up to $60 billion in the country's GDP. Now, perhaps you can answer this. How many workers does it take to operate a wind or solar farm?
Oh, well, Cory, haven't you heard about all the wonderful green jobs we're going to create with these solar farms and windmills and so on? Look, the serious point to all that is actually IPA research in relation to fossil fuels versus renewable shows that is a complete lie in relation to renewable jobs. For every 5 jobs that are destroyed in coal generation or coal mining, only 1 is created in renewable energy. But you're right, Cory, a nuclear industry would be a huge boost to jobs. It would be a huge economic driver in its own right. But more to the point, that having that cheap, reliable, abundant power would be good for jobs across the economy, because you know as well as I do that we are not having the manufacturing in Australia that we need. We do not have the economic growth that we need. We do not. The high price of our power, due to our negligence of the sector and our fiddling around with it for so many decades, is coming at a huge cost to jobs and to the economy. So the more power we can generate at low cost and high reliability, the better it would be for everyone.
Oh, Gideon, you're singing my tune. It's not just negligence of the sector, it's the insane policies of the politicians and being browbeaten by the green lobby. But, you know, the essential point I'm trying to make tonight, and I think you share, is that these green activists who are trying to save the planet from coal, which is still our cheapest mode of generating electricity, ignore nuclear, even though nuclear electricity saves the atmosphere in the States more than 547.5 million metric tonnes of carbon dioxide that would otherwise come from alternative sources. Now, that's the same as taking 117 million passenger vehicles off the road, more than every passenger vehicle currently on the road in the US. And yet the greenies won't have a bar of this. Are they insane, or just more insane than I thought they were before?
I think some of them are insane. I think the smarter ones know in their heart of hearts that, you know, again, I make the point, windmills and solar panels just cannot do the job of our aging coal power plants, and they can't do as well in terms of renewable energy than nuclear. Now, I'm a bit of a coal hugger, I'll admit. I don't think that, I don't lie in bed at night wondering about Australia's carbon emissions, and I don't share the view that we absolutely must get them down at all costs. But if that is your view, you cannot ignore nuclear. But I think the reason that nuclear hasn't been embraced by the political left and the political and cultural elite is because for them, low emissions are just a means to an end, I think. I think having unlimited power would get in the way of this Malthusian, moralistic argument that really we're overproducing and overconsuming and living a bit too large, and we need to repent for our sins against Mother Earth by, you know, lowering our needs and lowering our expectations of living standards. I think that is the disconnect between the stated aim of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and doing it with these monstrously inefficient and inadequate sources of so-called renewable energy.
Yeah, you're quite right. It's an anti-human agenda, anti-progress agenda. I think, Gideon, you've opened up another talking point later in the year about what you lie awake thinking of at night time. I'm not going to go there now.
There's a lot.
But nuclear energy Yeah, nuclear energy is, as you point out, the only emissions-free source of electricity that can be widely expanded and relied upon for baseload energy requirements. Now, if you wanted to do the same amount, or save the same amount of carbon dioxide as, say, produced by a 1,000-megawatt nuclear facility, a solar farm needs to have a footprint twice the size of Manhattan. It's about 100 square kilometres. Now, this is just not practical to think that you're going to have an unreliable power source that has huge environmental problems in disposing of it, and it's going to take up so much land mass. Why would anyone think that's a viable solution for us?
Yeah, look, and Cory, I am no tree hugger by nature, as you can probably tell, but there are serious environmental concerns that, again, wind and solar technology is throwing up. And don't take my word for it. Look at the excellent film produced by, and I've never said this before, Michael Moore last year called Planet of the Humans, talking about the fact that the building wind turbines and solar panels takes enormous amounts of raw materials from the earth. They have a short life and they're difficult to dispose of after they end up in landfill after we've stopped using them. Wind turbines, they call them bird blenders because they hoover up enormous numbers of rare and endangered birds. It's again, I make the point, it is a weird disconnect between people who purport to be out there saving the planet and their willful blindness to actual ecological issues that we can all, I think, accept are bad problems and things we need to mitigate. The other point to make, though, Cory, is also, it's a bit like coal again. We export a huge proportion of the world's uranium. We're happy to send it overseas for other countries to use for their nuclear power plants, but we won't use it ourselves. In fact, there's a ban on it federally on nuclear technology to generate power. Yet at the same time, we're shipping in all this equipment from made by China, our main strategic rival, to their economic benefit, and paying through the nose with power prices. It is a seriously skewed and
made with coal
system.
power. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned how the wind farms are dangerous to birds. They're also dangerous to people's hypocrisy meter, because I note that Bob Brown didn't want one in his backyard. He was happy for them to be sprung up everywhere else except parts of Tasmania where he was. But what about this? I mean, the lefties all say that that reactors are terrible and they're dangerous. We've had Chernobyl, which was a disaster, and they rate Fukushima. But modern reactors are safer, they're more versatile, and more efficient than ever before. And when you think about Chernobyl, it was bad. It involved a Soviet-era design without the inherent safety features. But Fukushima is now acknowledged, even by the ABC, who had to put out a statement today. It was an accident, or the deaths were caused by the tsunami and the earthquake, and there were no related deaths attributed to the nuclear reactor. This is an extraordinary mea culpa by the propagandists at their ABC, isn't it?
Yeah, an extraordinary mea culpa. Don't forget, this is the ABC that won't admit that Norman Swan was wrong when he said that Australia was 2 weeks behind Italy in terms of its enormous coronavirus caseload. They haven't admitted that Tim Flannery is wrong about his crazy climate predictions. They won't really admit that Emma Alberici was wrong about her economic pronouncements over the years. Yet on this, they have had to eat their humble pie and say we got it wrong. The ABC initially called the Fukushima disaster deadly. They have since revised that on the basis that nobody has died directly as a result of the Fukushima meltdown. As you said, they died from the tsunami and from the earthquake. One scientist is rumoured to have died from radiation poisoning, but even that is disputed. The fact of the matter is, Chernobyl, as you said, was a disaster owing to inferior Soviet-era technology and poorly trained personnel. The technology has rapidly improved since the 1980s. We're talking about 4 decades here. Small-scale reactors in particular can be factory-built. They don't need water to cool their reactors, and they can be used efficiently to scale up and down depending on the demands of the energy grid. So to make these absurd projections and scare campaigns based on technology that hasn't been in use for the better part of 40 years is such a misguided red herring, and it really is getting in the way of proper energy debate in this country.
It sure is, and particularly when you consider there are 440 nuclear power reactors in 31 countries worldwide. And that doesn't include the research reactors, with 220 of those that operate in 50 countries. It provides about 10% of the world's electricity, 18% if you think of the OECD countries. And these modern plants, they're safer, they're more flexible and more efficient than ever before. Why? Why is there this continual ban on nuclear power in this country, and why won't the Morrison government do something about it, Gideon?
Well, why won't the Morrison government do something about it? For the same reason the Morrison government doesn't do much on a lot of things, because they don't want the fight. They don't want to go into the next election with green placards in marginal seats saying Scott Morrison's going to trigger a meltdown in your neighbourhood. But as you correctly said in your editorial, a lot of people in Australia would know that we actually have a nuclear reactor in Australia, and it's not out in the middle of the Kimberley or out in the middle of the desert or anywhere else. It is in a suburb of Sydney. It's the Lucas Heights nuclear reactor, and this is how perverse the debate is. The Australian government has been looking for years for a place to store the waste that comes from that facility, and it's low-level waste. It's things like gowns and hats and goggles that have been used in nuclear medicine. And even then, whenever they try to find a remote place that's geologically safe to dump these very low-level nuclear waste, there is always some astroturfing exercise or some local group that scuttles it. So the biggest obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles to having a nuclear power plant in Australia is NIMBYism, and the fact that there'll be all manner of misguided campaigns run around the safety of this technology, and as usual, it'll get bogged down in the usual debates. But it's a debate that we have to have, Cory, because as I said, if we're going to go down this path, rightly or wrongly, for better or worse, of obsessing over our emissions, our carbon emissions, then can we at least do something about power prices while we're at it and adopt a technology that is, as far as I'm concerned, a complete no-brainer?
Gideon, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. And just before I go, I've got to let you know, I've been to Lucas Heights. I've seen the low-level waste stored in 44-gallon drums in a shed, and I've seen the intermediate level waste stored in these giant eggs that you touch them and they're warm, but they're in the back steps of Sydney. People just don't know, and they shouldn't be worried about it at all, because it's as safe as anything.
No.
But it'll be safer out in the outback. Hey, Gideon, I've got to go, but I always love you coming on the show. I love your Spectator TV as well. Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy your Easter weekend.
Thanks, Cory. You too, mate.